Good afternoon and welcome to the October 24th meeting of the Civil Service Commission. And we have roll call, please.
Commissioner Manukian?
Yeah, here.
Commissioner Gantis?
Here.
Chair Devine?
Here. And let the record show that Commissioner Gorian and Gazarian are absent at this point. Mr. Gazarian just showed up, so we have 4 commissioners. Next item.
Minutes?
Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
Moved. Second.
Approved with...
Abstain.
Yes, Mr. Manukian was not here, abstained, so it's approved by unanimous consent with 1 abstention. Next item.
Oral communications?
I do not have any cards. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to address the Commission on items not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item.
Recruitment and examination report.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this is the recruitment and examination report for this meeting. This, again, reflects the current recruitment load amongst the staff of various positions that are currently open for recruitment at various stages. You generally have the filing period as well as any applicable exam dates on this list. It is listed by those that are assigned to each staff. If you have questions about any of these recruitments, be happy to try and answer them. Otherwise, this is a note and file item.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item.
Eligible list established.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, for this week's meeting, we have 1 eligible list that has been established since our last meeting. This was an open recruitment for Workers' Comp Adjuster 1, Human Resources Department. As you can see, 156 applications received. Gone through the process of applications, supplemental questionnaire, oral board, and we ended up with a list of 6 individuals, and we're in the process of tendering an offer to the individual that we're hiring. We're going to be doing a slight background investigation for this individual, and when that's concluded, we hope to have a new Work Comp Adjuster 1. So with that, again, it's a note and file item. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, next item, please.
Report on advertising budget expenditures, July 2012 through September 2012.
Mr. Doyle.
Chair, members of the Commission, this is our quarterly advertising expenditures report. This covers the first 3 months of the 2012-2013 fiscal year. The total budget allotted for the entire fiscal year is $30,000. That's for all forms of advertising for the positions that we recruit. We've spent in this first quarter approximately $5,700. It seems to be on target with what we're budgeted. As you've seen this report many times before, it's divided into three areas. The first focuses on publications and websites that target ethnic communities. The second part of it are publications that are specific to certain trade journals. And then the third is publications or websites that relate to just general interest, such as the LA Times or Glendale News Press. Again, you can see from the report which which positions were advertised in what areas, and as you can see, we try and spread the advertising dollars in a good, diverse, and comprehensive way. And if you have any questions about this report, the expenditures, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll move to the next item, please.
Examination appeal, parking meter collector repair.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this is an examination of appeal of a recruitment that's currently under process called parking meter collector repair. This appeal was filed by Jeffrey Garcia, who is a city employee who had applied for this position and was initially screened out as far as the failure to meet the minimum qualifications for this position. And the parking meter collector repairer is a classification within our Public Works Department. And essentially, these are the individuals who go out and not only collect the money from our large number of parking meters, but also they're involved in maintaining them and also repairing them when necessary. This recruitment was conducted in a promotional fashion, meaning it was limited to just city employees. And so we did a recruitment. Mr. Garcia, who is an employee of the library department, he's a customer service representative, applied and his application was rejected. Mr. Garcia made contact with the Human Resources Department and spoke with our analyst who's conducting that recruitment. That would be Mr. Nersessian, and they discussed it, and Mr. Garcia then chose to appeal his exclusion from this recruitment process by way of a letter to me. I reviewed the information and came to the conclusion that, in my opinion, he did not meet the minimum requirements for the position, and thus I upheld the screening out of his application. Mr. Garcia did choose then to appeal this matter to the Civil Service Commission, and he is here today with his representatives from the GCEA. We have provided Mr. Garcia's application. I realize we probably should have included that in the packet you have, so it is here. In the various attachments on this, we have attachment A, the actual job bulletin for the position. Attachment B is the letter that he had received initially, screening out. Attachment C is his letter to me, appealing the action, and then attachment D is my response to his appeal. Attachment E is just a notification of his desire to take this to the Civil Service Commission. Mr. Garcia is here, and also Mr. Nersessian and the supervisor of this operation, Mr. Dave Liu from Public Works. Mr. Chair, it's up to you as to how you'd want to run this, but I think typically we'd probably have Mr. Nersessian make a comment, and then certainly have Mr. Garcia and his representatives comment as well.
I was going to suggest that, and at that point, commissioners can ask questions, and then we will go into deliberation and make a decision on this. So, Mr. Nersessian, did you want to lead off here?
Chair Devine, Commissioners, staff, Steve Nersessian, Human Resources Analyst 2, staff assigned and responsible for this particular recruitment process. To start off with, I'd like to point out that Mr. Garcia was disqualified for not meeting the minimum requirements, specifically 1 year of paid full-time experience in the repair of small, complicated mechanical devices. I like to briefly outline a couple of important facts. First, that I have personally administered or been in charge of probably over 200 recruitment processes, various starting from entry level all the way up to participating in selection processes for department heads. I have done evaluations for probably thousands of applications, and today is the first time I'm in front of Civil Service Commission defending or justifying an inclusion of an applicant from a process. Why is this important? I take pride in what I do, and my job to this city, citizens of Glendale, is to make sure that whoever is servicing out there, regardless of their position, is somebody who meets the minimum qualifications. Secondly, I like to point out to Mr. Garcia's personal record, which clearly outlines and shows the integrity of our process. Over the years, Mr. Garcia has applied for approximately 30 different positions. He's been invited to participate in approximately 20 of them. This clearly shows that our process is fair. Where Mr. Garcia was qualified, he's been invited. Where he wasn't qualified, he was disqualified. If you have any technical questions as far as the qualifications go, Mr. Delu perhaps can add some more stuff. Thank you.
Okay. Do you have any questions from commissioners
Just a
on?
quick question that I had. You indicated the portion that you felt that didn't meet the qualifications was the mechanical portion of it. And just to, real quickly, what does that entail? What does that require when you say mechanical, to do the repairs on the actual meters? Is that what we're talking about?
That is correct, Mr. Manukian. And if you like elaboration, again, I have the expert here who...
No problem. I just wanted to make sure I
Correct.
understood correctly. That's
Correct,
what
Mr. Manukian.
Okay, thank you. That's all right.
Any other questions? Hussein? I'm sorry.
I must have not been paying much attention. What are the minimum requirements for this position?
Sure, Mr. Gazarian. The minimum requirements for this position is, and I'll read it off of the 1 year of paid full-time experience in the repair of small, complicated mechanical devices, such as parking meters, and
Are you saying 1 year experience repairing mechanical devices?
1 year of paid full-time experience in the repair of small, complicated
Okay. I got you. All right, thank you. And?
mechanical devices, such as parking meters, and experience involving extensive public contract.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I do have a couple of questions. It says examination type, promotional examination, and then it says the position, this is an entry-level classification. So I think Mr. Doyle answered my question that in this case promotional applies to the fact that it's only open to city employees. It's not a promotional exam within the city of Glendale. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair Devine. It's the promotional indicates that it's only available to city employees as opposed to candidates from outside the organization.
Okay. And again, it indicates it's an entry-level classification. And I was wondering, if it's an entry level, how does one get the year of experience repairing mechanical devices if, in fact, this is the first place they start to do this type of work? What other positions offer this training or experience?
Chair Devine, to give you an example of some of the candidates in the pool that have moved forward, as you may know, we have conducted this particular recruitment. We have conducted an open examination, I would say about 3 years ago or so. At the time, due to background issues and such, we weren't successful in obtaining enough qualified candidates. Therefore, the department has been able to rotate field operation staff, such as maintenance workers, into an acting capacity by training them to fulfill not full duties of the position, but I would say 70-80% of the duties of the position, therefore offering some training opportunities. Also, as the recruitment showed, part of the reason we didn't restrict this, as we haven't done in the past, we just don't know if there are any other qualified candidates in other areas of the city that may have experience somewhere else outside of the city that can be part of this pool. And we do have at least one candidate that had outside experience, years of experience, similar qualification experience that has been invited and included in the process.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, the only ones for this exam that really were given the experience were the hand-picked ones that you put in to fill these positions until such an exam could be given.
Not necessarily. I like to refer to Dave, if you can add to this.
Chair Devine.
If I may, for a moment, I think in reading Mr. Doyle's report, I see it that those who have moved forward with the process thus far have all met the minimum requirements, including one of them being experience in repairing parking meters, if you will. So with that in mind, I'm curious, since Chair Devine posed the question, did the city train them how to repair parking meters, or they came knowledgeable with that expertise?
Most of them were trained internally. However, there is at least one candidate that had training outside the city.
Okay, thank you.
The point being, Chair, members of the Commission, is that most of the candidates that were accepted into this worked in the Public Works Department in this particular section. I think candidates who are maintenance workers or in other classifications that pay less than this that had gotten some exposure to parking meter collections, and I'm not sure the term hand-picked individuals is the right way to put it, but I would think more that people that are working in the department who were afforded the opportunity to either assist or fill in for someone in this operation. As Mr. Nersessian said, about 3 years ago, we attempted to fill this position, actually multiple positions, through an open recruitment process. We actually found some decent candidates, but unfortunately, due to the fact that these individuals will be handling large amounts of money, we put the candidates through a background investigation, and I think we had about 100% failure rate on our outside candidates. So I think at that point, you have to adjust your business practice and try and figure out something different. And I think, again, what occurred was enabling some cross-training of existing staff within the Public Works field operation to achieve the exposure to this position. I think before Mr. Nersessian sits down, he should indicate the number of applications we received and how many were brought forward, just so you have a general sense of that.
That was my next question.
Okay. Great minds think alike.
You got it.
Certainly, Chair and Mr. Doyle, we received 21 applications, and out of the 21, 6 moved forward, and 15 of them were disqualified.
And were these the six that were given the opportunity to be trained and work in this capacity pending this exam?
Again, 5 were.
And one was.
One.
Where did the one come from?
One is somebody who works in another department who has close to 20 years of experience working on similar mechanical devices.
And can I assume that out of these 6, that they not only possess the ability to repair mechanical devices or have that experience for a year, but they also have the extensive experience involving public contact?
Absolutely, Mr. Devine. At least from my end, as I said it in the beginning of my stating the facts, I try my best to make sure that folks that are servicing the city at least meet the minimum qualifications before they move forward.
I understand.
Well, if I may, Mr. Garcia does have public contact because I've reviewed his application.
Nobody's denying that, though.
So I just want to clarify that wasn't the disqualifying or lacking in his background, correct?
Absolutely, Mr. Gazarian. And actually, if you look at Mr. Doyle's response, he's complimented and he has extensive experience in that area. However, he's lacking the second portion of the experience.
And what are the possibilities if you looked at candidates that had this extensive public contact and reading his application, handling money and all of that, what would be involved if you accepted someone like that and then gave them on-the-job training for the repair?
Again, Mr. Devine, recruitment, each pool of every single pool of candidates is looked at the time of the examination, what the needs are of the department. Perhaps in the near future, we may have some sort of an apprenticeship opportunity, but currently, as you may know, what all city departments are facing with staff reduction, we really need somebody now that can hit the ground running, and that's what we decided to go with this process. Now, this doesn't say in the future we may not have some apprenticeship opportunities, but right now we just don't have the resources.
Okay. That's all the questions I have for now. If we can have Mr. Garcia come forward.
Thank you.
And or his representative.
Good evening. I'm Brian Niehaus, a labor representative with CEA on behalf of the appellant Jeff Garcia.
Okay.
Good
evening.
Hi.
And if I could just kind of frame the issue kind of presented to the commission, we would agree with the respondent that the real issue here is whether or not Garcia meets the minimum requirements as set out for the meter collector. And if you look at his past experience, he does have at least 1 year full-time paid experience in the repair of mechanical devices. Where I think the department or the management goes beyond that in disqualifying him is making a value judgment that he is less qualified than the other applicants. Furthermore, management makes the distinction that Mr. Garcia doesn't have any experience actually working on meters, which is not one of the minimum qualifications. The qualification is only that he has worked on small mechanical devices. So in meeting the minimum requirements, we do believe that Mr. Garcia should at least be allowed to move forward and compete with the other applicants. And if I could, I'll just kind of give a brief background of the experience he does have, and then I'll let him speak a little bit more specifically on it. He worked prior 2 years with the City of LA as a relief retirement worker. Part of his duties were working on computers, not only with the software, but actually with the hardware, taking apart the computer, putting in hard drives, putting in memory, putting in sound cards. Furthermore, at the County of LA, he was an office assistant and also a court services assistant, where he worked on court reporter machines, real-time equipment, again, not just with the software, but also with the hardware. And Mr. Garcia, I don't know if you want to expand a little bit on those duties.
Would you like me to?
Yes.
Please.
The application you have in front of you doesn't list City of LA because it only asks for 10 years. And I started with City of LA in 1996 through 98. I have 19 years full-time experience, full-time and part-time experience with no break in service with various government agencies. When I was with the County of LA Superior Court, I got a Court of Appeals recognition from one of the deputies. For the first time ever, the records matched Superior Courts, and I got a certificate. Not ever had that ever happened, and that was because of me, of my work. I'm a dedicated employee, and I think I've proven to the City of Glendale. I've worked for 19 years, and I provide excellent customer service. I can provide letters from my directors, managers. There's no question about it. Same thing with City of LA, County of LA. My customer service is excellent. I worked with all kinds of machinery. When I worked with the court, I would go to all the courtrooms throughout the LA County and assist the reporters with their real-time equipment, hooking up to the judges, to the plaintiff, the defendant, to the actual court reporter. Real-time equipment is basically the reporters typing through steno, and it's transferring to their laptops in English automatically. And this would provide the judge an easy access to refer back to something if necessary, or to highlight a certain response or an answer. With the central library where I am now, I'm in charge of all the public computers. I am the first person, and I keep a database as far as diagnosing and troubleshooting to prevent sending in a help ticket. This, because we're in a budget situation, so if I can fix it, then let's mitigate it and move forward if it's something very simple. With the court, I also worked on the electronic archiving system and scanning systems. With the City of LA, scanning systems, microfiche machines, building and assembling computers. Back in the 90s, you couldn't open a box and connect the computers through plugs. You actually opened them, they came, with no memory, no sound cards, no software. You had to install all of these, the drivers, everything. And that's what I did. And then once I finished it, I assembled it onto the staff person's desk. For 19 years, I've troubleshooted office equipment, such as, copiers, scanners, fax machines. I have the fundamentals. I have the common sense and the brain that works it. I'm a homeowner, so things break in the house. For over 20 years, I've been fixing things. I'm a young guy, and I have that technological brain. I'm good with iPads, iPhones, anything. HD TVs, 5.1 surround systems, you name it. Bluetoothing a car to a phone, pairing a phone, doing a universal garage with the home link system, you name it. I really don't need instructions. If I do, I refer to it, and it sinks in my brain and it makes sense and I can do it. I'm very patient, and I'm sorry. And, I assist patrons at the library with the microfiche machine, microfilm machine. I can go on and on and on.
While you were working with these different agencies, you mentioned you fixed fax machines or copiers or things like that.
Yes.
Did you actually get in and change a part or take it, unscrew the screws and get into the mechanical operation of the machines?
Unfortunately not, because those machines were contracted with other companies. But, when there's a paper jam, sometimes you would have to remove the roller to get to that little piece of paper that got stuck in there and re-screw in the roller. So as far as that, yes. I was limited to what I could do. Because
But have you had any actual experience fixing a mechanical device, regardless of what it is, where you were on full-time paid duty for that, and you actually had to get in and take apart the outside of it and replace a part or something like that?
Oh, yes. With the City of LA, when I worked from 1996 to 98, like I was mentioning, I assembled computers. We would open up the hard drive and see the inside and put in the sound cards, put in the memory, upgrade the memory if more memory was necessary, install the software, which is not a hardware, but it means somewhat. And when it got to the person's desk, assembled all the cables and plugs. I've done my research. I know what kind of machines Glendale uses for the parking meters. And like you said, Chair, this is an entry-level position. Some of the stuff you just got to learn on the job training.
In your
trying to advance my career with the city.
Okay, in your application, you mentioned that you had experience with the, I believe it was the Duncan 2100 parking meter and the pay, one of those.
I have experience as far as using them. As far as repairing them, no, because I live in the city, and we all use meters wherever we go, whether we go to Old Town Pasadena, whether we go to Glendale. I have experience with that. I did talk to one of the meters collectors. His name is Matt, and he explained to me. I took my time to actually talk with him. He was out in the field, and I mentioned to him that I was really interested in the position. And he himself mentioned that based on what you've told me and your technological experience, you would have no trouble. And he told me, when the battery's dead, you replace it with a 9-volt battery. Some use 2, some use 1. It's just a matter of sticking in the key and opening up the machine and repairing it. Sometimes you would have to take the part back to the office because it needed more extensive work or needed a new part. As far as the cash handling, I have over 7 years with the library preparing treasury receipts. I do it twice a week, sometimes more, and my money is 100% correct. Gia, the director, has never sent my money back for 7 years.
Okay, Mr. Garcia, first of all, I want to clarify something. We have absolutely no doubt you're an excellent employee. You work for us, and we appreciate that. I don't think the question here at all is your customer service. We are 100% in agreement with that. I think the question here is, and having some background into a certified Microsoft engineer in hardware, I'm very familiar with the process of building computer components and devices. And I have to tell you, it's not the same thing as putting a PCI slot or putting in a SSD RAM in there or connecting a SATA 3 hard drive with a cable is not the same as, at least from my understanding, from what we're talking about here of mechanical components. And the reference meter that you are talking about, that only applies only for a certain portion of not the entire city, is at least my understanding. it uses the same. And that's why they're and putting some of these requirements now. Maybe these requirements are overkill, maybe they're not. There must be a reason. I'm not the expert in the field of the meter repairs. I don't know how far they get into the technical end of it, but that's at least one point that I want to clarify, that we have no doubt about your ability to provide the customer service and as a loyal employee. I think the question comes to this, and I don't know the level of repairs, and there must be a reason, I would think, that this requirement's being put there. Again,
Well, that's a very good question. I think when we finish with Mr. Garcia and his representative, we can ask the representative from Public Works to let us know a little bit about what's entailed to do the mechanical repairs.
If I may, very briefly, Mr. Niehaus, you mentioned that the job requirement does not specifically require experience in parking meter repairs, but would you agree that it's a parking meter collector repairer position, and in the description of the attachment A in my packet, it lists minimum requirements as skill and aptitude in basic mechanical repairs. I assume it's mechanical repairs having to do with the parking meter, because that's the employment position it's asking.
Well, I would agree that is the position. However, the minimum qualification gives the example of such as a meter. Right. But I don't think that's part of the minimum qualification. That employee must have some experience with the meter.
Point well taken. And in looking at Mr. Garcia's work history, I echo my colleagues' remarks, Commissioner Manukian's remarks, that I think that not only Mr. Garcia is a model civil service employee and has been for all these years, obviously, and I actually have personally no doubt that Mr. Garcia can pick up and learn based on everything he's relayed to us. It appears to me, however, that my concern remains when the position is talking about parking meter collector repairer series, and it says removes meters that are out of order on a daily basis. And I look at Mr. Garcia's application, which does not list the City of Los Angeles employment because it's over 10 years old, I suppose. I see that he has troubleshooted computers and office equipment while working at the Los Angeles Superior Court. I see him, having the abilities of reconciling cash registers and tracking and entering payroll and whatnot. I guess where I am stuck is where my colleague Commissioner Manukian was. I lack the expertise to really qualitatively assess whether or not this is something that a person can pick up in 1 or 2 days of training, and therefore he should be allowed to continue with the process, or it's not.
Right. And I would submit to you again that I want to make sure, when there's a decision made to disqualify an employee from moving forward in the position, that it's based on the objective criteria of whether or not they meet that minimum qualification, not the value judgment of whether or not, this particular candidate is the most qualified or has experience in the specific, with the meter.
I agree with you.
And I would submit to you that his experience does qualify as repair small, complicated mechanical devices in working with computers, which gives him that minimum qualification. And then, if he was, through the competition of the application process, is awarded the position, then that minimum qualification, that minimal background would allow him to then, learn on the job of how to work with the actual meter.
Very well, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Guinness, do you have any?
No, I have no question.
Okay. I'd like to ask the representative from Public Works a quick question on the meters. And
Good evening, Commissioners.
Hi.
David Liu, Traffic and Parking Supervisor for the City of Glendale.
For what supervisor?
Traffic and Parking Supervisor for Public Works.
Okay. I just had a couple of questions on the meters we have now. I know that you put a credit card in and they're, what do they call, pay-as-you-go or whatever. Anyway, are those now mechanical or are they electronic?
They're both. We have currently 60 combination mechanical electronic meters, such as on Brand Boulevard throughout the city, and 1,500 mechanical single-space meters throughout the city, College, and Montrose areas. and another 2,000 in West Hollywood we service that are mechanical.
And on mechanical ones, are they modular so that if you have a problem with, let's say the coin doesn't go in or it gets stuck, do you just have to take the casing off or the housing off and replace the modular unit, or do your people actually get in and take apart the workings of the meter?
We build them. We rebuild them based on what's needed. If it's a traffic accident, obviously you have to dismantle the whole unit. If it's a simple jam, you basically disassemble it and reassemble it. If it's vandalism, sometimes you have to break in using certain tools, hand tools, power tools, or a variety of ways to get into the meters without damaging the rest of the meter. So it would depend on the situation. Every meter, even the electronic ones on Brand Boulevard that take credit cards, to a degree, they're electronic with computer parts. But again, when people vandalize them, you have to know how to break in them with certain types of tools, know how to use the certain types of tools so you don't damage the meter more, since the meters are very expensive, even the single-space ones throughout the city. So there really is a need for basic mechanical knowledge in this, not only how to assemble stuff and disassemble stuff with certain types of tools, but to be able to pick up and learn independently, since the majority of the time, the parking meter collector is all working independently throughout the city and West Hollywood. So if you're out of town, you need to know how to handle stuff on your own. So the learning curve is very short for our applicants who are hired. They need to be able to come in with already basic knowledge of mechanical ability, learn on the go with a short time frame, and be able to be out there by themselves. We won't have somebody that can run down to West Hollywood and show them, use this tool for this. They need to be able to already know that type of work.
Okay, and I think you said there were 6 applicants that were accepted for
Yes.
this exam process. How many openings are there, by the way?
There's 2 currently.
Two
currently,
openings?
yes.
And out of these 6 applicants, were these all, except for the one that came from outside, but these 5 were the ones that were picked to fill in the temporary position and be trained?
4 are currently working within my section. 1 is from GWP, who previously worked in my section years ago, and the other one is from Uptown, another section.
And how long did it take you to train these 4, let's say the 4 that work for you, how long did it take you to train them when they came in with the knowledge they had at that time?
It depends on their ability and what I'm having them do. Basic mechanical ability is a necessity, so I have different people doing different things, filling in since we're shorthanded. Some with a higher mechanical ability, I have them doing basic installs and removals, something that takes a more higher mechanical ability. The people with less mechanical ability that are filling in are doing collecting, maybe decals, sticker replacement, stuff that requires less until they learn more. They all have the knowledge of how to take the meters apart by working about 6 months to a year in and out of the shop.
Okay. So in your operation, it would be possible then to have someone that could do the collecting and the cash accounting and all of that while the other ones are doing the mechanical, and then that person could be trained as he goes along to pick up on the mechanical. Is that a...
No, they all do collecting and repairing at the same time. So whoever's collecting on brand, if they run across damaged meters, they need to be able to repair them right there. We don't call another person up there. We don't have, unfortunately, the personnel to do that. So same as when we're in West Hollywood, if we're collecting or doing maintenance for them, they need to be able to collect the money and repair it and, everything that's required for that particular situation at that time. So there is no real learning curve for one person to do one thing. They need to be able to do everything, a broad range of stuff. And that's why we listed the basic mechanical requirements, since the upper position would be advanced, would be a senior position that is above this entry-level position that requires extensive knowledge on not only the computer end of it, but the technical aspects of the mechanics, how to basically break into the meters.
Oops, I said that.
Did you say break in?
Yeah, but break in without damaging stuff. So you need to use the proper tools in order to do it. So there's particular ways we do stuff without damaging the rest of the meters, so we can replace specific parts after somebody vandalizes stuff.
So you're talking accessing the computer.
Well, not only accessing, but each one has specific lock cylinders that are restricted to our cylinder, to our city. You need to be able to not only replace those, but if they're damaged or vandalized, say somebody sticks a screwdriver into them.
Right.
So you need to be able to reassemble them correctly.
Any other questions?
I do have a question. It follows up a question by our chairman. This is an entry-level position. Is there a position lower than this? Is there an apprentice position?
No. This entry level is parking meter collector repair. The only one above that would be the senior parking meter collector repair.
I didn't ask you above, I asked you below.
No.
On the exam, I noticed that it's first is the evaluation of the experience, and secondly, I guess it's an oral exam, a 100%
Yes.
oral. Do you participate in that?
Not on the board directly, no.
Okay. Do you know if there's any requirement to, during the oral, to have them demonstrate their mechanical ability or their ability to, in other words, is there a test?
No, we don't have a practical on this test at all, since it's all internal people throughout the city. The applicants should have basic mechanical ability to apply. If we were doing an open recruitment like we did previously, we did a mechanical portion, a written portion, and then the oral, and then an internal oral, and just basically chose from there.
So then you're just really relying on the application as to what you think they can do or what they think they can do.
Yes.
And making a selection on that.
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay. I don't have any other questions of this gentleman. Is there any other further questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we deliberate here. Yep. According to our city attorney, we deliberate in the open.
This is an interesting process. It's been. We've done things a little bit different.
I thought that I saw the package said that we can deliberate or take it under advisement. So if we can take it under advisement, that means we can deliberate in the back.
If we listed it as a closed session item, then you could, but because it's an open session item, you would deliberate here.
Okay.
So then how would we take it under submission? How would we do that?
I'll tell you next time. Can I?
Because that seemed to be an option, correct?
Yeah. If it was going.
We can list it back, we can bring it back to a future meeting, but we cannot, at this point, deliberate in closed session.
Do you have another?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a final point before we begin deliberations.
Please.
It was brought up earlier with the respondent on Mr. Garcia's personal record, which we don't necessarily think would be relevant. However, we do want to point out, since it was brought up, that he was, in a previous application, disqualified. This was 2 months ago for another position. He did appeal that, and it was overturned at the lower level, and he was allowed to move on through the application process.
Lower level being Mr. Doyle?
That's correct.
For what position?
This was the library circulation supervisor.
I'm sorry, that really confuses me. You're suggesting, or you're saying that he applied for a library supervisor position. He was turned down, but he appealed it to Human Resources, Mr. Doyle, who then overturned the rejection, if you will, and is he now processing further forward with that petition, with that process?
No, the position has been filled by another applicant, but
I
he
see.
was allowed to go on to the next stage
see.
of
But on this occasion, Mr. Doyle did not deem it appropriate to give the same...
correct. He upheld the disqualification.
I see. Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Mr. Chair, if I could clarify.
Sorry, hold on. Did
Can I
you?
add to that point, sir?
Please.
My point in this is, within 2 months, I applied for 2 positions, and both got disqualified. The first one, when I wrote a letter to Mr. Doyle, he immediately reversed the decision and let me proceed with the interview. They did not even inform me that I could do that. It was my common sense to ask that question to Mr. Suto, the library analyst. And my argument with that is 3 applicants for that position had no college degree, but those 2 were admitted, and I had more work experience. I had to jump that extra hurdle just to get that interview. Same thing here. Within 2 months, he got disqualified. I got to jump another hurdle. Why did not all 3 of us get disqualified and all 3 write a letter to Matt? Only I did. And the one who got the position is actually the one with no college degree.
But you too do not have a college degree based
That's
on your
correct.
application.
That's correct. But what I'm trying to say is, those 3 of the 3 applicants with no college degree, 2 did not have to write a letter to Mr. Doyle. They automatically proceeded with the interview process. I had to investigate further and talk with Alex, who said you can write a letter to Matt and proceed with the process. By doing that letter, he immediately reversed the decision and said, here's your interview date and time. What I'm trying to say is, why didn't all three get disqualified if all three of us were equal and I had more work experience?
I don't, I know that neither one of my commissioners.
Yeah, so what I'm trying to say is, within 2 months...
If I may finish, sir.
Sorry.
Neither one of my fellow commissioners have any information before us that you are referencing as to some other petition with two other applicants, and I'm not sure, Mr. Chair, if that is an appropriate remark for us to consider or give it any weight, because I don't know the circumstances of those individuals, their qualifications, whether they were more qualified than you, not qualified as much as you. I have no idea, and I don't think it is fair to the process for me as one commissioner here to entertain what I'm reading between your lines as perhaps something that you deem it to be inappropriate as it pertains to you.
No, my point was, there's some disparity.
I know exactly what your point is, but how could I take that without, I'm speaking for myself as Commissioner Gazarian, how could I take that and do what with it when you have not presented this commission anything and it is not pertaining to this position?
Oh, no, I'm not asking you to do anything on that action. I'm just responding to Mr. Narcessian when he addressed the commission in the beginning, saying in all his 200-plus applicants that he accepted, this is the first time ever he's been in front of you. This is what I'm trying to respond to.
I think you might want to let us deliberate, unless there's any other
I
questions.
think Mr. Doyle had a question.
Mr. Doyle had a clarification.
Did you have any?
No, I don't have anything further.
Okay, I think that's fine. So we'll ask Mr. Doyle to make his comments.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The position which Mr. Garcia references was a different recruitment process for which he did, in fact, not meet the minimum requirements for that position, as the bulletin stated. The position, by the way, did not require a college degree. And we're not here to discuss that situation. However, I do have the discretion to allow individuals in, and I think I made reference to that in my response letter to Mr. Garcia, that there is a substitution clause in every job bulletin, and I employ that substitution clause very, very rarely. And in this particular circumstance, I looked at Mr. Garcia's qualifications, and while he was short in one area, I found that his many years of experience in customer service in the library would make up for his shortcomings in another area of the minimum requirements. And therefore, I did allow him in. And I think, the only thing that proves is that we do have a process that's fair, and we are willing to give these things another look on occasion. And by the way, all candidates are notified at numerous points in the recruitment process of their rights to appeal or challenge their disqualification. And I think Mr. Garcia was alluding to the fact that he was the only one who had to research whatever information. Well, again, the information is there. The appeal process is quite clear. And again, I think we demonstrated good faith in dealing with him on that particular situation. On this one, however, I could not make the finding that his qualification, working with repairing computers or unjamming fax machines or whatever the case may be, was comparable to the minimum requirement of 1 year paid full-time experience in the repair of small, complicated mechanical devices such as parking meters. And quite honestly, it would be very easy for me to sit in my office and say, be the nice guy and allow everyone in. But the fact is that there are people who look at these job bulletins, they look at the minimum requirements, and they make a decision whether they qualify or not. And most people who determine that they're not qualified go ahead and select themselves out by their own choice and make that decision. And it really wouldn't be fair of me to just simply allow everyone in who happens to raise an objection. So with that, again, it would be a lot easier for me to have done that. But in this case, I really feel that, in all due respect, that the candidate did not meet this minimum requirement. And if this were a matter of us having a shortage of qualified candidates, then his application might have gotten another look. But we actually did have 5 candidates with direct experience with parking meters, and the 5th candidate, the 6th candidate, who happens to be a library employee, is somebody who's worked in the business outside of the city of Glendale, repairing coin-operated machines and typewriters, and it's sort of a side job for that individual, and who's actually a locksmith apprentice as well. So we're very comfortable with the 6 that we have selected to move forward on this process.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Doyle. Would you like to start deliberation?
Yes, I would. First of all, I agree with Mr. Doyle, and again, I want to reiterate that Mr. Garcia is an excellent employee of our city, and but I think there's a reason why Mr. Nersessian has that listed as a minimum requirement, because that is needed, in my opinion. And I think it's unfair in a sense that when we already have qualified applicants, and I'm sure Mr. Garcia is going to do a great job, but that, in my opinion, doesn't meet the requirements. And with all due respect, I agree with Mr. Doyle.
Okay. Mr. Ganis, do you want to go next?
Nope.
Mr. Kazarian?
Thank you, Commissioner Chair Devine. I believe that the voluntary disclosure by Mr. Garcia is very commendable, that very recently there was an opportunity lost, but then yet reinstated by Mr. Doyle, allowing him to proceed, despite the fact that in the end, in the final analysis, apparently that position was not filled by Mr. Garcia. That reaffirms in my mind the fairness of the process of the Human Resources Department division of the city. Having reviewed all of the documents and having already stated to Mr. Garcia previously that I think he would probably pick it up and go forward, nevertheless, I don't see anything inappropriate or unfair in having deemed him not minimally qualified at this time, based on the totality of the circumstances that were presented to this commission.
Ganis?
I'm ready to vote.
Okay, I have a statement. I take a little different perspective than my colleagues, at least 2 of them, and I don't know where Mr. Ganis is coming down on this. I certainly agree with Mr. Doyle and Mr. Nersessian in terms of they're watching out for the interests of the city and wanting to get the best qualified candidates. Also, I think sitting here as a civil service commissioner, I have a responsibility to make sure the process is fair to all candidates. And there are a couple of things in this process that are of concern to me, and that I feel that it puts it from, in a weight process, it takes it off the center of which way to go to a little bit in terms of in favor of the candidate. And the things that concern me are, number one, and I alluded to this initially, about how the 5 candidates that did qualified. And to me, it says it's an entry-level classification. And in essence, these people, I use the word handpicked, and I think Mr. Doyle took exception to that. But anyway, there were 5 individuals that were given, I would call it a leg up on this exam in terms of being selected to fill the positions temporarily, get the on-the-job training, and then an exam is given, and lo and behold, they're the only ones that are qualifying for the exam. I don't think that's fair in terms of city employees and what civil service is all about. The second thing is that Mr. Doyle or someone mentioned that if there was a shortage of candidates, that perhaps Mr. Garcia's application would be accepted. And to me, I find that really not very compelling in terms of rejecting his. To me, it doesn't matter how many candidates are qualifying for the position. It's the shortage of candidates that's going to determine whether or not a person that's on the fence is going to get in or get out. I don't think that's a fair decision in terms of the candidate that wants to get into the exam. Also, I feel that since there's only 6 candidates now, is that right? 6 that have been accepted out of the 20, and also I feel that Mr. Garcia did express, although they weren't really qualifications that zeroed in on a mechanical ability in terms of taking a machine apart, I think that he has enough, at least he convinced me that he has enough practical experience in dealing with these types of things that he could certainly catch on very quickly, which again shoves me over onto the side of giving him a chance to at least qualify. And the bottom line will be when the raters review the 6 or 7 candidates, depending on which way this commission goes, they're going to be the ones that will make the final decision. It won't be this commission, it won't be Mr. Doyle, and it sounds like it won't be the representative of Public Works. And they will certainly have the ability to protect the citizens of L.A. and choose out of those 6 the 2 that are just...
About the citizens of Glendale.
Well, those 2. I'm still thinking back to my L.A. days.
I'm aware of that.
Sorry about that. The citizens of Glendale, in terms of selecting the best candidate out of that grouping. So with that long explanation, I would be in favor of allowing him to participate in the next phase of the exam.
How are we going to do this?
We have to hear from Mr. Gant.
No, I'm ready to vote.
We have a motion.
Well, I'm sorry?
Is there a motion?
You'd have to have a motion to overturn the appeal is what you need.
I would be making a motion to deny the appeal.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call.
Commissioner Manukian?
Yes.
Commissioner Gazarian?
Yes.
Commissioner Gantis?
Yes.
Commissioner Chair Devine?
No.
Okay.
That concludes that. We'll move on to the next item.
Report on proposed charter amendments to civil service rules and regulations.
Okay, Mr. Gazarian must leave at this point. Also, I do have a lot of questions on that item, so I'm going to ask we carry that over until the next meeting.
I think we can because it has to be put on the ballot here relatively shortly. I'm not sure what the time is.
Well, I think that regardless of what this commission does, we're not approving or denying it. We're just a for information item. So whether we get the information before or after it's on the ballot, I don't think it'll make any difference.
Yeah, I
Correct me
agree.
if I'm wrong.
No, we have meet and confer obligations on this. The placement of this on the ballot is not imminent, but it certainly could be extended, brought over to the next meeting. The only concern I have is there may be people here who wanted to speak on the item. And okay, maybe not then.
Okay, well, can we carry it over to the next meeting? I'm going to ask my fellow commissioners.
Yeah, because I have to leave too.
Fine.
We certainly have enough time, the next meeting being November 14th, that gives us enough time. We have to take it back to council before that, but we have another opportunity to go back to council in early December. So certainly, if you have comments on November 14th, we would be able to take those back in December.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
If we have suggestions for additional amendments, is that part of this discussion?
It can be. We would have to take those to council. If you do have specific amendments, I would encourage you to contact me directly. We don't have to do it in the context of this meeting, and it could be an individual proposal, and we can entertain that and then bring that back to the commission and see if there's an overall agreement.
Okay.
Okay. With that said, well, I'll do that during comments. We'll go to the next item.
Agenda forecast.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, the agenda forecast shows our upcoming meetings in November and December. I think, we still have some hearings going, and our upcoming meetings are relatively light at this point. I do believe that on the 28th of November, we'll be without one commissioner, Mr. Mr. Gazarian. But other than that, really not certain what we're going to have on these agendas for the next few weeks.
Well, I know, Mr. Chairman, I recall hearing that we are using some of our meeting nights for hearings, so if we can possibly free up some time for hearings by canceling a meeting, I would encourage that to be done. Know of at least one.
As a matter of fact, the Wednesday, November the 28th, there is a hearing for one of our cases, so that might be a good candidate to cancel, and it happens to be the week.
Yeah.
Happens to be the week after Thanksgiving as well.
Okay, well, let's,
It happens to be the week after Thanksgiving, which the week of Thanksgiving is abbreviated, so it might affect our ability to get an agenda together and get items for
okay,
that.
so we'll cancel that meeting.
We could.
28th is canceled.
Certainly.
Any other questions on that? Okay, next item.
Reports, past due employee performance evaluation.
Carry that over till the next meeting. Next item.
Civil Service Commission, staff comments.
Comments?
Have a good evening.
I have two quick ones. Number one, I'd like to find out the status of the request we made regarding those items on the similar disqualification and the need for the commission to be ruling on those items. There were two items that we had asked for a report from Mr. Doyle in cooperation with Ms. Farpetian. So I just want to know what the status of that, when we can expect that to come back.
Mr. Chair, I would ask that we be allowed some additional time to get that back to you.
Get a ballpark?
December seems fair. I can try that.
Okay. And along that line, getting back to what we discussed earlier about possible additional items to go request charter changes, there's been one item, and I know that Mr. Therian and I are both on the same page on that one, and it was discussed a number of years ago. Actually in 2010, August 2010, when I had brought up the question of whether the full commission is required to make the final decision when there's been a hearing panel of 3 or 2 officers. And we had run that by the city attorney's office. We received a memo from Mr. Scott Howard. It was dated August 31st, 2010, and he gave a very detailed explanation of why his interpretation was that we must have the full commission rule on the cases, even though 2 or 3 of the members may not have been on it. He did say at the end, though, that if we wanted to change that, we would need to go for a charter change. So what I would like to suggest, with the concurrence of my fellow commissioners, is that we put this item back on the agenda for discussion so that each commissioner can throw out his thoughts on it, and then possibly at that point ask if the process, or ask city attorney's office the process to affect a charter change if needed. So with that, do I have concurrence?
No, but you...
Okay. Well, we have 3 concurrences.
Yes, I agree.
So, and again, you mentioned there was a deadline on charter changes, so I don't know if this could be brought in so that we could, if this goes for a charter change, if we could get that in on this series.
Well, what we can certainly do is, when we go back to council in November, identify that there's an additional proposal, a potential proposal from the commission, and that you intend to discuss it on the 14th. And then if there is agreement on the 14th to move forward with that, then we would include it as part of our report in December.
Okay. Okay, with that, there's no more business. Is there a move?
Move to adjourn.
Move to adjourn. We are adjourned. Did I beat the 18?
It's been 3 years since I'm knocking on your door, and I